Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our September edition of Lunch a la Carte, as it was so aptly named by our guest speaker last month, a lunch and learn session for folks who are interested in learning more about research and disease prevention and treatment of Alzheimer's. And we are not limited to Rotary members, and we are certainly excited to have a non-Rotarian joining us today. And we hope that each of you will share this recording after we are completed and share previous recordings as well, so we can continue to encourage other guests to join us as well. A couple of quick announcements before we move into our presentation today. If you are not currently getting the CART newsletter, if you would like to send me a private message or an email, tiffany@tiffanyirvin.com, or you can email cartfundnews@gmail.com. I will add both of those to the chat as well. Then please feel free to send me an email and I will get you added to our e-news list and make sure you get updates on future events as well. I mentioned briefly, we are about to undergo an exciting new branding and imaging campaign for the CART Fund. We'll be rolling that out in early October. There will be a short preview of it at our Zone Institute Summit in Baltimore, the end of this month. So we look forward to sharing more with each of you about that. You're not going to want to miss that. That's very exciting. We do not have a date scheduled for our October meeting with Dr. Levy. They're having a little trouble finding a date that works for him. So please continue to watch the DACDB calendar so that you will see when that is added. We'll also make another event on Facebook as well. And of course, it will be listed in our newsletter. It is my honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Ben Bahr to you. He is the William C. Friday Chair and Distinguished Professor at the Pembroke campus of the University of North Carolina. He leads the Alzheimer's Disease Research Lab and the biotech imaging facilities at UNCP, which integrates brain explant disease models with transgenic mouse models to study different dementias and their related risk factors, including age-linked neuronal stress, seizure events, and military blast exposures. You can see why I read this. I would never begin to try to memorize that. His PhD in chemistry from the University of California, Santa Barbara, identified a target for the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. Among his honors are the North Carolina Governor James Holshouser Award for Excellence in Public Service. If you haven't seen the information on that, it's incredible, the beautiful medal that he won. We were very proud of him for that.
All right, Tiffany, that's getting to be too much.
And he also won the Governor Max Gardner Award for contributions towards human health. But we are most proud, of course, that he was the recipient of a $100,000 grant from the CART Fund back in 2014. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Ben Bahr.
Well, thank you very much, Tiffany, for the invitation. And I'd like to see all these people here that are interested in brain health and respecting their own brains. That's very important. All right, we're going to talk about your brain today. And notice the nice fresh fruits and vegetables and some eating products that I hope you see in your kitchen right now. And notice that you can see these, and try to remember blueberries, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and almonds. Don't write them down. I want you to remember those four things. But if you can't remember them 10 minutes from now, please don't self-diagnose yourself with Alzheimer's disease. You cannot do that. Everybody's worried about getting Alzheimer's. And just because I backed into my garage door because I had too many things in my hands, I was rushed, doesn't mean I have Alzheimer's disease. It was a long time ago last week, but it was very traumatic. And so don't do any self-diagnosing. So we're going to talk about what keeps your brain healthy. Obviously, there's lots of companies working on drugs and other avenues to offset the bad word of Alzheimer's disease because society is getting older. It's not going to be long where there's just as many people over 65 as there are under 65. And this is some old data. Alzheimer's disease is actually up about 145% in just the last 10 years, whereas other diseases are going down because of medicine because people are taking care of themselves. Doctors are telling people to watch your weight, watch what you eat. Certain cancer-causing things people are avoiding. But Alzheimer's disease keeps going up because people are living longer. If you don't die of something else, you're more prone to get an age-related disease. And Rotarians, as you know, you guys rock. You've done a great job and miraculous job of reducing polio down to almost nothing. Of course, there's been some blips this year in different areas of the world, including New York of all places. But Rotarians have done a wonderful job and doing a great job for Alzheimer's disease with CART. Some CART people just come along and say, you know, we want to help researchers, and they help my lab to jumpstart different ideas because the big companies with billions of dollars are walking away from Alzheimer's disease. They're finding out they invest lots and lots of money, and then when they do clinical trials, the drug does not work because your brain is very complicated. Your brain keeps me up at night trying to figure it out. And the same problem with big companies. They're now saying making a drug that works great in a mouse model of Alzheimer's, when you get to that very complicated human that have all kinds of different stress levels and scheduling issues, and they're on different kinds of drugs because of all the different ailments we get as we get old, that's the bigger problem. So my lab, with the help of CART, start looking outside the box. We said, let's start looking at natural products and even combinations of approved drugs with some natural products. And other scientists, even at Harvard University and Berkeley and San Francisco, they've saw our work and they're now starting to spend a lot more time on natural products. So that all was helped with the CART grant, and I think we're changing the field a little bit. So you're going to hear a lot more about natural products. So as time goes by, there's more and more people over 60. So that's going to have a big influence on the governments that have to take care of older people. People are working longer. I just worked with a Nobel laureate at Chapel Hill. I walked into his lab. He's working on a grant, 93 years old. So he never stopped working. And I see people in grocery stores and hardware stores working into their 70s and 80s. So keep your body working, whether it's in the yard, whether you're knitting or dancing or tinkering in the garage. Make a bat box. We've got bats around our house, so I make little bat boxes. Keep your joints moving, because as you get old, you can't worry about, a bit of gray in your hair. I have a touch, just a fairly noticeable gray in my hair, but other people worry about losing your memory abilities. And these are the numbers I showed you before, but mostly I wanted to teach you what the word dementia means, because a lot of people come up to me and says, my grandmother has dementia, but it's not Alzheimer's disease. Most doctors and medical people, they'd rather use the word dementia instead of diagnosing somebody with Alzheimer's, because that takes a little bit more information. That's very difficult. Not all doctors and medical facilities have enough scanning ability and time to really diagnose. But you can diagnose Alzheimer's. It takes 12 to 18 months because Alzheimer's is a progressive loss of memory and other everyday abilities of taking care of yourself. And don't self-diagnose yourself, but if you find yourself forgetting dates and appointments, you might want to talk to your doctor, or you're writing checks differently. But if you're putting the coffee pot in the refrigerator and the milk in the cabinet, I do that once a week. So those are normal age-related problems. And Alzheimer's disease just happens to be the most common form of dementia. You can get dementia from all kinds of things, even Parkinson's. Certain people with Parkinson's have dementia. But car accidents, falling off a horse or a bicycle, anything that affects the brain, that affects brain functions, is dementia. Even drug abuse and alcohol abuse, so be very careful with those type of things. Now, I could show you lots and lots of reports. There's this guy named Dr. Tanzi. He's at Harvard. He's a very good piano player as well. He's now working on different natural products, something called cat's claw. No, it's not from cats. It's some kind of bark. And there's a company that sells it, but I'm not promoting anything, because if you walk into a natural food store, you'll see 20 things that tell you this will help your brain, this will cure you of Alzheimer's disease. But if you can't see the blueberry, I was going to stop sharing to show you some blueberries. If you can't see the blueberry and see the broccoli, you don't know what's in that capsule. So if you're going to take natural products, go to the source of who's selling it, get more information, look at their spec sheets, just like the spec sheets of a car if you're going to buy it. Know what's going in your body, right? You wash your blueberries, make sure they're not moldy, but before you put them in your body, just like a pill. Just because you buy something in a store, it says, oh, this is wonderful. So that's the problem with supplements. But it's still in a very important field, because the only things that's been linked to reducing the risk of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias is exercise and a healthy diet. And not all of us can exercise, but trust me, the littlest things is exercise. If you're watching TV or even reading a book, lift your legs off the floor one at a time and get it to be just a habit that you do, and that moves some joints, move some arms around when you're watching TV. Just don't punch anybody that's next to you, that might cause problems. Anything that gets your blood flow going. Walks are wonderful, or even standing in a room and reaching straight up and just holding your arms out. Those are the kinds of exercise that you can do into your 70s and 80s and 90s for most of us. And a healthy diet. And it's well known that a poor diet can increase dementia risk. And several studies, many studies, are showing healthy diet improves brain cognition. And what my lab has been doing is, what is in diet? Of course, there's diets all over the world, and there's so many different components of diet. So this is a huge task of trying to understand this. And we have chemists that can separate every tiny molecule. And we've been doing exactly that. What is diet doing? And what is exercise doing? And we found a nice connection that I'm going to explain to you what your brain is doing. When it exercises, you're actually releasing things into your body that helps your brain when you exercise. And certain diets do the same thing. So there is this connection between exercise and a healthy diet. For this brain of yours, that as I told you, is very complicated. My mother's been asking me what I do for a living for the past 40 years now. And I tell her, think of the brain like the planet Earth. A little size difference there, but from far away, the planet looks like this cool little thing. And when you look at the brain, it's this big lumpy thing that looks like a little Nerf football. But the more you zoom in on either one, the more information you can start to see. And we've been challenged with this issue of how to understand the brain. And when I tell people you have 90 billion nerve cells and another 85 billion of a different kind of cell that helps the nerve cells talk to each other, those numbers, people can't grasp that. So I say, think of it like the planet Earth, where every nerve cell is like a house, an office, a condo, a trailer, home, etc., because you have just as many of those of nerve cells in your brain as there are of houses, trailers, and offices on the entire planet. And it's just that your brain is very organized in neighborhoods, just like the planet's organized. You can zoom in on the brain and start to see cellular neighborhoods. You're looking at a purple layer of nerve cells. Every one of those little spots is a single nerve cell that can talk to about 4,000 other nerve cells. And they're organized in nice little neighborhoods. And symptoms of any disease is all about the neighborhood that's being affected. If you have Alzheimer's disease, you're affecting a neighborhood that's involved in memory. If you have Parkinson's disease, the disease is affecting a neuronal neighborhood that controls arm movements and leg movements. That's why Parkinson's disease has tremors and different movement challenges. I can superimpose where my parents used to live in Temecula, California. That's near San Diego. And as you know, California, they love to build tract homes about 400 at a time. And they organize these neighborhoods very distinctly, and they're wired together with electrical networks for electricity and for telephone networks. Same with the brain. So I think the brain just looked at how the Earth was designed to establish how the brain works. And you can zoom in on individual houses when you look at the Earth, just like you can zoom on individual neurons and see components in it. And this is a nice artist rendition of nerve cells. If you zoomed in, and you can actually see real pictures like this. And these are some nerve cells. What's very important about nerve cells is that they have long arms that have little tiny telephone receivers. All those little dots, we call those synaptic connections. And one nerve cell can talk to up to 5,000, even 7,000 other nerve cells. It's like if your house had 7,000 telephone lines going into it, that's how complicated a single nerve cell is. So if you did the math, you have about 90 billion of these nerve cells times 7,000 connections each. If this was a computer, your brain is about 40 terabytes of memory capacity. So don't think you can ever run out of memory capacity. And no, you don't only use 10% of your brain like you might hear. That's a fallacy. Your brain is interconnected, so you can't use one part of your brain without using all of it. You might only use 10% of the memory capacity, and most of us probably only use 0.1% of the memory capacity. You have the ability to memorize the encyclopedia. If you spent decades and decades, your brain can store all the information in the encyclopedia, and there are people that remember everything. It's just how much time you want to put to something. And we study those connections in the brain. We lose those connections with age. These are called synaptic integrity, synaptic mechanisms. And normal age-related loss, we're forgetting where your keys are, walking out to a parking lot and there's an empty space and you say, someone stole my car. And then you remember, wait a minute, I parked on the other side of the building today. Those are all normal age-related memory loss. Alzheimer's disease and other dementias is a much more accelerated rate of that loss that can affect how you think. And it starts out very slowly, where you might just forget the name of somebody in a movie, but then you can't remember the person at your door who lives 3 doors down. But I don't remember people's names either, so I would have Alzheimer's 20 years ago. But it gets worse until you can't recognize people you were just at a party with, or your own cousins, and then your family members. So it's the progressive loss of memory ability that's the key of Alzheimer's that you have to watch out for. And inside this nerve cell, this is a cartoon of a nerve cell. It's these little deposits of garbage that's happening for years. And it's well known now, with the help of our work supported by CART, that little tiny machines inside your cells called lysosomes gets rid of that garbage. And the problem that explains age-related memory loss is because your little garbage disposals called lysosomes are also losing their functional ability with age. So here's a little cartoon. These are actual nerve cells. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's about 5 or 6 cell bodies there, and you can see how long and complex their wires are. They span far away from the cell bodies. And if you zoom in on what we call a normal neuron, there's no accumulation inside. They send machinery to that nerve ending for communication. Whereas a nerve cell that's got Alzheimer's type disease, you see accumulation of material because the aged cell has garbage disposals called lysosomes that are not doing well at getting rid of it. And you start clogging the wires. That these cells can't send machinery down the long wires so that their telephone receivers work. Essentially, that's what's going on as you get old, that you're losing how clear of a signal you're getting at your nerve endings where you make a connection with other cells. And we've been developing drugs, and now we're finding out which natural products actually enhance the ability of these little garbage disposals. And that's the work we're doing. CART helped me file for the first patent that was ever filed at UNC-Pembroke, and it was awarded just 2 years ago. So we are working with the kind of molecules that we discovered. We're sharing them with companies and other labs, hoping we can build the information that's started with the project. So this is the cartoon, and if you've never seen one, these are what garbage disposals look like if you're shopping for one. And when you're young, your little lysosomes inside your cells look just like these brand new, shiny garbage disposals. But as we get older, they might get a little rusty on the ends. There's some corrosion on the pipes, just like if you look under my kitchen sink right now. And if you're old like me, you might remember this scene. You might remember these 2 young ladies, Lucy and Ethel, I believe their names were, that the job never stops. They got trained to do one job, but then it just never stopped. It actually sped up. And in your brain, neurons never stop. It's like a party every day in your brain. Your neurons are always taking in materials, and they're always figuring out what to do with them, how to make new machinery to keep those telephone connections working well. And as components get old or damaged, you always have to get rid of old and damaged proteins. So there's always this balance between making new things but getting rid of old things. Just like when you're bringing in 20 bags of groceries for a party, you got to get rid of the garbage just so that you can make the burgers and the hot dogs and the stuff for the party. But if all the garbage is going on the floor, then you can't have a efficient party. And if you're doing that every day for 10, 20, 30 years, you're going to have a very dirty house. Same thing in your nerve cells. So it's all about the balance between protein production and protein clearance inside nerve cells. This is not in your stomach, but what goes in your stomach affects your brain. So it helps keep signaling pathways happy. And that helps you understand what is a muffin and what is a dog. This is one of those cognitive tests, but it's also an eye test if you don't have good eyes or good glasses. So these are one of those little tests. And half the time, please don't eat the puppy. That's the main point. Don't eat the puppy. So I'm sure you have lots of questions, but remember, don't self-diagnose yourself and don't worry about catching Alzheimer's disease. And I've heard from many experts in the field that it's those people that say, I hope I don't get Alzheimer's, or I think I'm getting Alzheimer's. Those are the people that are the least likely to get Alzheimer's. Your brain's more active, etc. There's little things that happen during the slow process of Alzheimer's that people stop questioning themselves and just not want to express the kind of issues they have. So there's many series of questions you can get asked if you talk to your doctor about what are the kind of surveys you should take to whether you're worried about developing a problem. And this is my big group. I don't do this alone. I got people from all over the world. You should understand that every drug you take, whether it's Lipitor or all the different pain medications, it takes people from 20, 30, 40 different countries from all kinds of backgrounds that do the thousands of jobs to develop a drug. And I have people from Brazil and South Africa that have come to Pembroke to work with me. I collaborate with people all over the world for new ideas. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So my question is to you, what do you believe took your proposal to a stage where our selection committee chose you as one of the recipients in 2014? What do you think it was about it that caught their attention?
I believe the work we were doing at the time was something very different than what was the mainstream Alzheimer's. Everybody at the time was just, how do you get rid of the bad stuff? The bad stuff was plaques and tangles. And plaques were made out of amyloid or A beta, and tangles were made out of tau. So everybody was just, what's the enzyme that makes tau? Or what's the enzyme that phosphorylates tau? We got to find a drug that blocks that. Every drug they make was inhibiting something. However, every enzyme in your body has hundreds, if not 1,000 jobs. So if you find an inhibitor that will block some pathway that stops this bad protein from forming, trouble is that same inhibitor is blocking hundreds of other jobs, and that's what they found out. The big pharma lost billions of dollars trying drugs that had side effects. Our CART proposal was, we want to find a drug that activates a pathway in the body, not inhibits. We want to make these garbage disposals more active. And since we got that proposal funded and got also papers that said this was supported by CART, I can show you hundreds of papers from major universities, the Harvards, the Yales, the Stanfords, saying activating protein clearance pathways, whether it's lysosomes or proteasomes. And now there's dual things. So we've started a whole field. So I'm standing back watching. My lab's not quite as active as it used to be. But now, very important that CART can brag about is that UNC-Pembroke that CART supported is now a partner institution of the brand new Duke UNC Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. It's abbreviated ADRC. There's only 33 in the country. They're NIH funded, very large collaborative research centers. And UNCP, along with ECU and some other UNC campuses, are partner institutions. And I'm always happy to help district meetings and help CART. You guys did a great job and still doing a great job. So thank you very much.
I'm on my in my car on my iPad because I'm going to yoga right after this. I had a member that asked a question that I had been wondering about. I don't know if you can address this or not. Perhaps a lot of the materials that we've received have talked about inflammation. And when I think of inflammation, I think about my arthritis and mostly arthritis, but I know this is talking about the brain, and the member asked me, to ask about the brain inflammation. I guess that's what it's referring to, and we don't understand how that relates or what that has to do with Alzheimer's. I'm not really sure if I'm asking the right question, but does that make sense? Inflammation as it relates to the brain?
That's a very good question, and thank you for going to yoga. Yoga is a wonderful type of exercise. And for all you people that I can't do yoga because it sounds weird, don't use the word yoga. Just do stretches. Stretch to the point that it feels good to you, but do different
Yeah.
movements, and that's exercise. And thanks for the inflammation question. This will now turn into a 4-hour lecture. So everyone sit back and relax. This is going to take a while. Inflammation, if you bump your knee, you'll see a bruise. Your body responds to protect and repair itself. So the bruising is actually a repair process. Your brain does the same thing, whether you're dropped on your head at 2 years old, or you have a slight neurotrauma with a car accident, and you put the rake down wrong on the ground and you stepped on it and the thing came up and hit you in the head. I've never done that, only 3 times. So when you see stars in front of your eyes, your brain will actually have little inflammatory responses. And if you're watching a movie or the news, you might hear about a bad car accident and someone had to have part of their skull removed because their brain is swelling. So your brain does the same kind of things with bruising and damage to joints, etc. But it's the little tiny things with age. Your brain is going through age-related changes. You might run up 2 flights of stairs and you're huffing and puffing and you're a little dizzy. You actually caused a small insult to your brain. That's hypoxia, low oxygen. And those little things can influence the brain, and there will be inflammatory responses. And after decades and decades and decades, in our golden years of 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, those little inflammatory responses contribute to brain vulnerability. So when the culprits of Alzheimer's, those protein accumulation events, those amyloids and taus, if you have other inflammatory responses going on, your brain's more vulnerable. And every brain is different, obviously. When you have lunch with 5 people, those are 5 very different brains, and you only get along with 3 of those people, and the other 2 are have people you don't get along with. Same with brains are different as far as inflammatory responses, repair signals, etc. So 2 people could have the same types of Alzheimer's events going on, but only one of those people get Alzheimer's because the other one has better repair mechanisms. And this is a long response, but companies have spent lots of money looking for that super anti-inflammatory drug. They even made super type aspirins, and they did clinical trials, but there was side effects just with stomach issues. But I take ibuprofen, not Tylenol, which is acetaminophen that has liver complications. So I tell everyone to avoid acetaminophen, and that's your doctor tells you need it. But ibuprofen, I take 1 or 2 a day. Usually it's for back issues, but there's been some studies that say people who take regular ibuprofen have lower risk of dementia. I don't know if there's been a lot of studies on that, but your whole body is doing inflammation as we get older, whether it's back strain, joint strain. So ask your doctor whether you're okay doing something like that, or make sure you're taking the right anti-inflammatory that you can handle long-term. But that's another issue that your brain is going through, is inflammatory responses.
I'm Eldon Borifin. Dr. Bahr, I appreciate your presentation. My late wife died of dementia. My sister died of it. My present wife and I believe strongly that your body is what food you put in it. And I appreciate your comment about the certain foods that are helpful. My first question related to that would be, are you proposing organic versus non-organic, I would hope? And the second question, you mentioned blueberries, broccolis. I have that every day. And you have whole greens, and I believe it was nuts of some type. My wife and I do not eat whole grains. We don't think that that's proper. So what other fruits, vegetables are you recommending? Thank you for your time.
Sure. I'm not a nutritionist and I'm not an expert on all these issues, but I keep up on what I can. So I'll just throw you a few things that I know. First, I think you guys can see me. I can't see myself. There I am. So here I'm holding a can of Pepsi. If you drink these lovely little sodas, which I don't, it just happens to be in my house, you'd have to fill up this little glass, it's a pretty big glass, all the way up with dry sugar. That's how much sugar is in one can of Pepsi, or soda, let's just call it soda. So I tell my students and anyone I talk to, if you drink cans of soda, it should take you 2 days to drink it, or only drink one a day, if that. And if you love sweet tea, you really got to say that is something you're going to treat yourself to occasionally, once or twice a week. So watch how much sugar you take up. But I don't know how much sugar is bad. I just say lots of people, your body can't process that much. And then as far as diets in certain parts of the country where clearly in certain areas of Italy and France, there's people very low incidence of Alzheimer's, and they seem to be eating lots of fruits and vegetables, olive oils, nuts. Make sure it's healthy food. If it's fish, you got to make sure it's not built up with certain toxins, because some places they culture their fish or shellfish. So you have to worry about everything you put in your body. As far as supplements, whether it's dried blueberries or fresh blueberries, people have isolated components of certain plants and roots. And we looked at it in brain tissue in a dish to see, are these activating the garbage disposals, those little lysosomes that help keep neurons happy? And we studied without knowing what the company was giving us. We just tried everything they gave us. And it was very interesting that 2 out of the 10 just stood out as activating those particular pathways for protein clearance. So that just says there's something in diet or something in plants and roots that can activate the same kind of pathway that exercise does, because many groups have looked at blood samples from rats and monkeys and humans after exercise and found the same type of activating pathways as we show that turns on those garbage disposals. So it's very interesting that exercise seems to do similar. It's just not going through the digestive system. Your muscles give off a signal. So as far as supplements, instead of guessing which one it is at a nature company and worried, are they really putting what's on the label in that capsule because there's no regulation? When you buy fresh fruits and vegetables, you can see the product. Oftentimes you can see whether it's organic and whether it's coming from reputable farms. But even if it's not organic, if you don't have access to organic produce, wash them well and eat as many fresh fruits and vegetables and nuts and healthy food. And I'm not saying never eat fried chicken, just don't eat fried chicken Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. It's just healthy. There's fat content, there's all kinds of things. And obesity and high cholesterol, all these things have been linked to increasing your risk of Alzheimer's. Doesn't mean you're gonna get Alzheimer's. Smoking actually has been shown to slightly decrease your risk of Alzheimer's because the nicotine's activating certain parts in your brain, but I'm not going to tell people to start smoking because that increases your risk 20-fold on getting something else that will kill you. So you're always trying to balance what's healthy and what's not healthy, and keeping your lungs very efficient for taking in air is obviously very important for the brain, because everything that decreases your risk of Alzheimer's is about getting oxygen to the brain, whether it's exercise, whether it's yoga or breathing exercises. And diet just keeps you healthier. And walk to the grocery store if it's close. Force yourself to do a little bit extra effort to get something you really like.
Thank you.
Am I telling people to eat healthy too much? Are they going to get mad at me? I like a chocolate. I like a chocolate brownie every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So You can yell at me too, but I worry about high fat diets. And have you tried the Impossible Whopper? I'll have one of those once or twice a month. And it still has mayonnaise and all the bad things, but it's plant-based burger, and it's wonderful. It brings me back to my roots of having a burger.
My name is George Sachs. Again, thank you for your presentation and for answering these questions. My question goes back to the diagnosis part of Alzheimer's. And my dad had it. He initially, it was a dementia diagnosis that turned quickly to Alzheimer's. He once that determination was made, he lived about a year and a half. Wound up in an Alzheimer's unit he was there for about 4 months. My other question on this is as far as the terminologies used, and my sister, who had Down syndrome, also passed and was determined to have what they called accelerated onset Alzheimer's. And I've also heard the term advanced onset Alzheimer's. Now, are these just things that people are making up in terms of a process or an accelerated, I guess, kind of a response? There was someone who I was talking with had their mother had they called it advanced onset at age 46, and she passed. So that it was little. I'm not real sure about how the timeline of Alzheimer's is. It seems to be all over the place.
Very good question, George. And this is very important that I go over this. Maybe I should have gone through it before. And thank you for being more of an expert on Alzheimer's disease than me. I always tell people I work on rats and mice. It's people that live with it and see what it is. If you met one person with dementia, you only know one, because every person is different as far as the kind of memory issues they're going to have or other personality changes, etc. All right, Alzheimer's disease. It used to be that you could not diagnose it until you can take the brain out, slice it up, and look at it under a microscope. That hasn't been the case for decades. Now these Alzheimer's disease research centers, decades ago, were able to get, I think, 90% accuracy. Now they're probably up to 95, but it takes 12 to 18 months. They have to do, with experts doing this, memory tests showing progressive memory loss, or whatever testing they're doing, but also they have to rule out other things, rule out strokes and drug issues, or even microbiome issues. So they rule out all the other issues. And usually a good MRI and other kind of tests can help diagnose. Now, Alzheimer's disease, I tell people it's the most complicated disease on the planet. I'm sure if you study the heart, you'll disagree with me. But Alzheimer's disease has a minor component that's hereditary. If it's hereditary, that means you have the genes in you and you will get Alzheimer's at a certain age. And that's called early onset Alzheimer's. I've never heard of accelerated Alzheimer's. Those are probably the same thing, early onset. Early onset can be as young as 29, I was told, but it's usually 40s and 50s. So that's hereditary. And if your family has it, you would notice a series of uncles and aunts and people, it's usually about 50% of the family, is coming down with it in 40s and 50s. But if you have a loved one or a family member that came down with Alzheimer's disease, late 60s and 70s, that's the typical late onset. And 95% plus of Alzheimer's cases is non-hereditary. So if grandma gets it at 82 years old, I tell students, don't think you're going to get it because your family has it. That's typical late onset Alzheimer's. What makes Alzheimer's complicated is also this. When they first discovered the gene linked to the hereditary form of Alzheimer's, it was a big race. And that professor I mentioned to you, Dr. Tanzi, his first name is Rudy or Rudolfo Tanzi. He wrote a book that's very interesting to read about the race to find the gene for Alzheimer's. But when they found it, other researchers said, oh, I was trying to get that first, and I guess I all stopped looking at what I was working on. But then people noticed, wait a minute, there's this other family in this other country, but I can't find that gene mutation. Turns out after decades and decades of research, they're now up to about 160 different genes that can be mutated to cause hereditary Alzheimer's. It's not like Tay-Sachs disease. It's one gene, it's one molecule that changes and you get Tay-Sachs disease. This is 160 different genes. It's still only 4 or 5% of all Alzheimer's. So that's crazy that this is happening in Alzheimer's disease. So really Alzheimer's disease is about 160 different diseases packed into one because it's the same symptoms and it's not even the same chromosome. Down syndrome, you mentioned, they have 3 copies of a certain chromosome, 21, I believe. And that has the gene for that amyloid thing. So they have 3 copies, so they're prone to Alzheimer's. But there's other genes on other chromosomes that are linked to that. So there are different terminologies, but it's usually down to just early onset, which is the rare form, and the late onset, often abbreviated LOAD, late onset Alzheimer's disease, LOAD. But let me mention one more thing that just popped in the literature, one of the biggest papers in the field that I was just telling my wife about a few days ago. The terrible problem of Down syndrome. And I know people with Downs they live great lives. Their body is dealing with their own challenges. Turns out Down syndrome is helping us solve Alzheimer's disease. It's a little early, but they've studied enough people with Down syndrome that have the 3 chromosomes and the 3 genes that says they should get Alzheimer's disease at this early onset because they have 3 copies, but people with Downs don't get it till several years later. And now they've looked at the genetic makeup of what else is on that tripled chromosome, and they found a gene that explains why it slows down the onset of Alzheimer's. So even though people with Down syndrome are prone to Alzheimer's, they're getting it later than they should, and we're discovering what gene is helping that. So now researchers are using that information. Can we tap into that pathway? And that's all I know so far, but it's very interesting that the issue of Down syndrome might be given as a clue how to treat Alzheimer's disease.
Hello, my name is Virginia Simmons. I am the non-Rotarian guest here. I appreciate the invitation, Dr. Bahr. It's been very interesting. I do have a question though about the garbage disposal cleaners, the lysosomes. Is it only the amyloid and tau that they're going after, or are there other things that influence the garbage, like cholesterol, blood sugar, the inflammation? Does it help all of that stuff, or is it only specifically for proteins?
Very good question. Tiffany, you didn't say I'd be challenged with these great questions, so thank you, Virginia. And I'm a non-Rotarian, so don't be worried about that. I can't keep up with Rotarians. I'm sorry, they just do way too much. I'm always in the lab. They can't get me out of the lab. Lysosomes are these tiny little sacs of enzymes. If you think of a nerve cell, the big thing inside, if you're swimming inside a nerve cell or any cell, the big thing you would see is this big nucleus. That's like the library of the house where all your information is in there, your DNA that encodes everything. And you have the mitochondria, that's like the furnace. Little lysosomes are even smaller than a mitochondria. And they're full of 50 or 60 different kinds of enzymes that chew on things. So no, they don't, they chew on anything that's brought to them. They're just the the mechanism to get rid of things. And there's actually a bigger sac thing called an autophagosome. So it gets complicated. And the little lysosome will just fuse with this big bag of something to spit in the enzymes to help chew on things. But your question about cholesterol and even carbohydrate, complex carbohydrates that can aggregate, there's groups in Seattle that they say it's these sugar complexes that form as we get old that can affect the lysosomes. And cholesterol can accumulate inside the lysosome. So yes, lysosomes as we get old, because pretty much you have almost every nerve cell you've had since you were 20 years old. Yes, your brain's making a few new ones. People got very excited when they saw evidence that our brain makes new neurons. But it's like a few condos built on some Caribbean island on the planet Earth. That's kind of how many new neurons are being made in the brain. Usually all your nerve cells are just busy still doing the same job they've been doing since you were 20, and the little lysosomes, you make new lysosomes, but if they're packed with bad stuff, sometimes you just can't even get rid of that old lysosome because it's been filled up with bad things. It's like when you kept putting fried chicken grease and broccoli pieces into your garbage disposal, and it's not running as well, but you just kept putting more stuff down, and eventually you can't do much with it.
We certainly want to say thank you to Dr. Bahr for spending your time with us, not only to prepare for this presentation, but to spend your lunch hour with us. Lunch a la carte is very successful and very popular, and I know it's important to folks to hear directly from you rather than us. But the best part is you're giving us nuggets of information that we can share when we do our presentations as well at other Rotary clubs.